Have you ever wondered if we started life as human beings, or did we come from other species of animals? Scientists have grappled with these questions for a long time, and in 1924, they discovered a skull in South Africa that answered many of these questions. It was at a limestone quarry outside of South Africa. During this time, these workers unearthed many fossils, mostly of baboons and other animals, so they thought this one was also an animal. The director gave it to his son, who displayed it on the mantle at their home. When a family friend, who happened to be a scientist, came to visit, she noticed something very significant about the skull and passed it along to her mentor. The research showed that this was indeed a very special skull, and what they found pointed to the possibility that this area could be where the ancestors of human beings originated from. The scientists working on the skull published a paper in which they named the skull the tongue skull, and they concluded the following. The skull belonged to a 3-year-old child of one of the earliest human fossils found in Africa, and it was important because it showed the very first evidence of human beings walking on 2 legs instead of 4. They concluded this because of where the spinal cord connected to its brain, which was more to the front of the tongue skull, allowing the head to balance on top of the neck. It also meant its hands were free to build tools and use weapons. Apes, which walk on 4 legs, had the spine coming out of the back of the head, so its eyes could face forward. This skull actually represented a transitional human being that was in between apes and modern man. How did scientists know this was a child? They looked at his teeth. His molars were just beginning to erupt, showing that he was about 3 years old. How did this child die? He was probably attacked and killed by an eagle, based on holes found at the bottom of where his eyes were. These holes are consistent with the marks made by sharp talons and beaks of modern-day eagles when they attack monkeys. They also found eggshells at the site. Scientists, however, were skeptical when this research was published. It took over 20 years after that before scientists accepted the importance of Africa as a major source of human evolution. The turning point came in 1947, after prominent researchers studied many more fossils from this area. They agreed that this was the origin of man, and termed these fossils hominids, which meant they had features that were in between apes and modern human beings. Here's another question. Have you ever wondered where people in different countries came from? Human beings look very different from one another across the globe. For example, Chinese citizens look very different, say, from South African citizens, who look very different from Indian citizens, who look very different from Italian citizens. How do you think people ended up all around the world? Scientists, again, have been grappling with this question for a long time, but currently there is a predominant theory known as the out of Africa theory, and it suggests that our ancestors all around the world actually came from one place, Africa. This theory was developed only recently, in the 1980s, when scientists started finding more and more evidence supporting it. What it says is this. Our ancestors, Homo sapiens, evolved out of Africa about 130,000 years ago. Then, they walked out of Africa around the Arabian Sea and down into Southeast Asia about 60,000 years ago. Around 45,000 years ago, they reached Australia through land bridges that connected Asia to Australia at that time. Some took a separate route through Asia, probably through Turkey, and into Europe. Later, some came to North America, and some came all the way down into South America. The evidence that supported the out of Africa theory was based on new tools. Before, scientists found fossils and other evidence around the world and tried to piece together their theories. Now, they use new tools to work backwards. They studied the DNA, which is genetic material in our blood that we share with our relatives of modern human beings all around the world, analyzing genetic mutations, which is how our DNA changed from parent to child, and they traced our ancestry from now back into the past. DNA helped them piece together other evidence they found too. In 2007, that's only 7 years ago, in a cave in South Africa, scientists found evidence that humans were eating shellfish 160,000 years ago, making complex tools and using red pigment to paint. Tool making and making dyes may not seem like a big deal, but it is, because these are all actually modern human behaviors. Then, about 80,000 years ago, modern humans entered a dynamic period of innovation. Evidence found in South African caves showed ornamental shell beads among the world's first known jewelry. Pieces of inscribed ostrich eggshell turned up as well, and evidence was found of throwing spears and arrows. Fine-grained stone needed for careful workmanship had been brought here from up to 18 miles away, which suggested they'd traded with others. Bones at South African sites showed that humans were killing animals, like seals, and they found that these ancient humans were hunter-gatherers. They were clearing land so that they could grow edible roots and tubers. Again, these were exciting finds to scientists because these were really sophisticated human activities that were occurring a very long time ago. Almost all of these sites had piles of seashells, suggesting that seafood was providing a nutritional trigger at a crucial point in human history. Basically, seafood was providing fatty acids to modern human beings whose brains were getting very large. Their big brains and evidence that they were eating seafood with its fatty acids to feed their brains meant that humans were getting smarter. Did new tools, better nutrition, or some genetic mutation allow humans to explore the world? Possibly, but other scholars point to other mundane, or less exciting, factors that may have contributed to the walk out of Africa. A recent DNA study suggests that massive drought may have led to the need to search for new lands. You hear a lot of climate change nowadays, but even then, climate change may have been a factor. Whatever the reason, the ancient Africans reached a point where they were ready to leave, and they did. While scientists today do not quite agree on all the specifics, DNA evidence suggests the following. All human beings today are descendants from the San community, who lived in southern and eastern Africa about 60,000 years ago. Geneticist Spencer Wells, who leads National Geographic's Genographic project, suggests that this group first traveled out of Africa along its eastern coast, hugging the coast into the Near East, going down into India, which appears to be the first settling point. From here, using land bridges that connected Asia to Australia, they traveled into Indonesia and Australia. Later, another group split off from settlers in the Near East, going north into Europe and eventually into North and South America.